Your grandma had a secret that would make modern gardeners think she'd lost her mind. While everyone else was putting their gardens to bed in November, she was still planting vegetables that would feed her family through the harshest winter months. But here's the shocking part. These November plantings often produced more food than her summer garden, and the reason why will completely change how you think about winter growing. 1. Broad beans, fava beans. Picture your grandma on a gray November morning, frost crunching under her boots as she pressed fava bean seeds into the frozen earth while her neighbors thought gardening season was over. She understood something that would shock modern gardeners. These protein-rich legumes actually preferred cold weather and could survive temperatures down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit while continuing to grow. Unlike their warm-season cousins, fava beans thrived in conditions that would kill other crops. Your grandma would plant fava bean seeds 2 inches deep in November's cold soil, knowing these plants would develop slowly through winter, then explode with growth in early spring. She understood that fava beans weren't just food, they were nitrogen factories, fixing atmospheric nitrogen in the soil and improving the garden for next year's crops while providing fresh protein when other sources were expensive and scarce. 2. Winter wheat. The golden wheat that would become your grandma's bread flour started as November plantings when this hardy grain could establish before winter's worst weather. Winter wheat was planted in fall to take advantage of cool, moist conditions for germination and root development. Your grandma would broadcast winter wheat seeds across prepared ground in November, then lightly rake them in, knowing these plants would develop strong root systems over winter. She understood that winter wheat produced higher yields than spring wheat because it had a longer growing season and could take advantage of spring moisture. Those November wheat plantings would provide the grain that became flour for bread, the staff of life that sustained families through lean times when store-bought flour was expensive. 3. Winter rye. The hardy rye that would provide both grain and green manure started as November plantings when this incredibly tough cereal could establish in poor soils that wouldn't support other crops. Winter rye was the ultimate survival crop, able to grow in sandy, acidic soils where other grains failed. Your grandma would plant winter rye in November, understanding that it served multiple purposes: grain for flour, green tops for livestock feed, and soil improvement through its extensive root system. She knew that rye was so hardy it could survive harsh winters that killed other grains, making it insurance against crop failure. Those November rye plantings would provide grain for dark, nutritious bread and help build soil fertility for future crops. 4. Crimson clover. The nitrogen-fixing crimson clover that would improve your grandma's soil started as November plantings when this leguminous cover crop could establish before winter. Crimson clover wasn't grown for direct food, but for its ability to capture atmospheric nitrogen and add it to the soil, making future crops more productive. Your grandma would plant crimson clover in November, understanding that this cover crop would protect the soil from erosion while adding valuable nutrients. She knew that crimson clover would bloom in spring, providing nectar for beneficial insects before being turned under to enrich the soil. Those November clover plantings represented long-term thinking, investing in soil health that would pay dividends for years to come. 5. Barley. The versatile barley that would provide both human food and livestock feed started as November plantings when this hardy grain could establish in cool weather. Winter barley was incredibly versatile, used for making bread, porridge, and even beer when times were good. Your grandma would plant winter barley in November, choosing varieties that could survive harsh winters and produce reliable crops. She understood that barley was more drought-tolerant than wheat and could grow in poorer soils, making it a reliable backup crop when other grains failed. Those November barley plantings would provide grain that could feed both family and livestock, making it one of the most practical crops she could grow. 6. Overwintering peas. The sweet, tender peas that would provide early spring protein started as November plantings of cold, hardy varieties that could survive winter conditions. Unlike regular garden peas, overwintering peas were bred to withstand freezing temperatures and continue growing when spring arrived. Your grandma would plant overwintering pea seeds in November, understanding that these plants would establish slowly through winter, then produce earlier crops than spring plantings. She knew that peas were valuable not just for their protein-rich seeds, but for their nitrogen-fixing ability that improves soil for future crops. Those November pea plantings would provide fresh protein when other sources were expensive and help prepare the soil for summer vegetables. 7. Corn salad. The delicate, nutty-flavored mache that added interest to your grandma's winter salads started as November sowings when this incredibly hardy green could establish before winter's arrival. Also called corn salad or lamb's lettuce, mache was so cold-hardy it could survive temperatures down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit without protection. Your grandma would scatter mache seeds in November, barely covering them with soil, knowing this crop practically took care of itself once established. She understood that mache would often self-seed, creating a perpetual patch that returned year after year with no effort. The kind of practical gardening that defined her generation and provided fresh greens when other sources were unavailable. 8. Winter cress. The peppery winter cress that added bite to your grandma's winter meals started as November plantings when this hardy green could establish in cold, wet conditions that would kill other crops. Winter cress thrived in cool, moist conditions and could survive harsh winters that damaged less hardy greens. Your grandma would plant winter cress seeds in November, understanding that this green would provide fresh, spicy leaves throughout winter when other seasonings were dried or preserved. She valued winter cress for its high vitamin C content and its ability to prevent scurvy during long winters when fresh vegetables were scarce. Those November plantings would provide essential nutrition and flavor when the family's diet was becoming monotonous. 9. Chives. The flavorful chives that would enhance your grandma's winter cooking started as November plantings when these hardy perennial herbs could establish before winter's worst weather. Chives were incredibly cold, hardy, and would return year after year, providing fresh onion flavor throughout the growing season. Your grandma would plant chive seeds or divide existing clumps in November, understanding that these herbs would provide fresh flavor when other seasonings were expensive or unavailable. She knew that chives were among the first herbs to emerge in spring, providing fresh flavor when the family was desperate for something other than stored foods. Those November chive plantings would provide decades of reliable seasoning with minimal care. 10. Sorrel. The tart, lemony sorrel that added tang to your grandma's winter meals started as November plantings when this hardy perennial could establish before winter. Sorrel was incredibly cold-hardy and provided fresh, acidic leaves that could brighten winter soups and stews when other fresh flavors were unavailable. Your grandma would plant sorrel seeds in November, understanding that this perennial would return year after year, providing reliable harvests with minimal care. She valued sorrel for its high vitamin C content and its ability to add fresh, bright flavor to otherwise bland winter meals. Those November sorrel plantings would provide decades of tart, nutritious greens that could prevent scurvy and add variety to the family's diet. 11. Multiplier onions. The hardy multiplier onions that would provide both green tops and storage bulbs started as November plantings when these perennial alliums could establish before winter. Unlike regular onions, Multiplier onions formed clumps that could be divided and replanted, providing a perpetual source of onions with minimal effort. Your grandma would plant multiplier onion sets in November, understanding that these hardy plants would survive harsh winters and provide both fresh green tops and storage bulbs. She knew that multiplier onions were incredibly reliable and productive, often producing more bulbs than were planted. Those November plantings would provide fresh onion flavor throughout winter and storage bulbs that could last until the next harvest. 12. Horseradish. The fiery horseradish that would clear your grandma's sinuses and preserve her food started as November root plantings when this hardy perennial could establish before winter. Horseradish was incredibly hardy and would return year after year, providing pungent roots that could be grated fresh or preserved in vinegar. Your grandma would plant horseradish root cuttings in November, understanding that this plant would spread and provide decades of harvests with minimal care. She valued horseradish not just for its intense flavor, but for its preservative qualities and its ability to clear congestion during winter colds. Those November horseradish plantings would provide a reliable source of natural medicine and food preservation aid. 13. Walking onions. The self-propagating walking onions that would spread throughout your grandma's garden started as November plantings, when these unique alliums could establish before winter. Walking onions got their name from their ability to walk across the garden by forming bulblets at the top of their stems that would root where they touched the ground. Your grandma would plant walking onion sets in November, understanding that these plants would provide both green tops for fresh eating and bulbs for cooking while spreading to create new plants. She knew that walking onions were incredibly hardy and required no replanting once established. Those November plantings would create a self-sustaining onion patch that would provide fresh alliums for generations. 14. Salsify. The oyster-flavored salsify roots that would add unique taste to your grandma's winter meals started as November plantings when these hardy roots could establish before winter. Also called oyster plant, salsify developed its best flavor when grown in cool weather and could be harvested throughout winter. Your grandma would plant salsify seeds in November, understanding that these long white roots required a full growing season to develop properly. She valued salsify for its unique oyster-like flavor and its ability to add variety to winter meals when other vegetables were in storage. Those November salsify plantings would provide exotic flavors and essential nutrition during the long winter months when dietary variety was limited. 15. Scorzonera. The black-skinned Scorzonera roots that would provide unique flavors started as November plantings when these hardy roots could establish in cool weather. Also called black salsify, Scorzonera had a more complex flavor than regular salsify and could be harvested throughout winter. Your grandma would plant Scorzonera seeds in November, understanding that these roots developed their best flavor when grown in cool conditions. She knew that Scorzonera was incredibly hardy and could survive harsh winters that damaged other root crops. Those November plantings would provide exotic flavors and reliable nutrition when other vegetables were unavailable or too expensive to buy. 16. Sea kale. The blanched sea kale shoots that would provide early spring vegetables started as November plantings when this hardy perennial could establish before winter. Sea kale was incredibly hardy and could survive harsh coastal conditions, making it perfect for difficult growing sites. Your grandma would plant sea kale crowns in November, understanding that this perennial would provide decades of harvests once established. She knew that sea kale shoots could be blanched by covering them in early spring, creating tender asparagus-like vegetables when other fresh foods were scarce. Those November sea kale plantings represented long-term investment in reliable, nutritious vegetables that would provide food for generations. 17. Good King Henry. The nutritious, Good King Henry that would provide both leaves and shoots started as November plantings when this hardy perennial could establish before winter. Also called poor man's asparagus, Good King Henry was incredibly hardy and could survive harsh conditions while providing multiple harvests throughout the growing season. Your grandma would plant Good King Henry seeds in November, understanding that this plant would provide both leafy greens and tender shoots that could be eaten like asparagus. She valued this plant for its reliability and its ability to provide fresh vegetables when other crops failed. Those November plantings would create a permanent patch of nutritious vegetables that would return year after year with minimal care. 18. Winter purslane. The succulent winter purslane that would provide fresh greens throughout winter started as November plantings when this hardy annual could establish in cold conditions. Winter purslane was completely different from summer purslane, being much more cold hardy and able to survive harsh winter conditions. Your grandma would plant winter purslane seeds in November, understanding that this green would provide fresh, succulent leaves throughout winter when other greens were unavailable. She knew that winter purslane was packed with nutrients and could add variety to winter salads and cooked dishes. Those November plantings would provide essential vitamins and minerals during the long winter months when fresh vegetables were scarce. 19. Land cress. The watercress-flavored land cress that would add peppery bite to your grandma's winter meals started as November plantings when this hardy green could establish in cold conditions. Land cress provided the same peppery flavor as watercress, but could be grown in regular garden soil rather than requiring running water. Your grandma would plant land cress seeds in November, understanding that this green would survive harsh winters and provide fresh, spicy leaves when other seasonings were expensive. She valued land cress for its high vitamin C content and its ability to prevent scurvy during long winters. Those November plantings would provide essential nutrition and flavor when the family's diet was becoming bland and monotonous. 20 radishes. The large storage radishes that would provide fresh vegetables throughout winter started as November plantings when these hardy roots could establish before winter's worst weather. Unlike small spring radishes, winter radishes were large, dense roots that could be stored for months in root cellars. Your grandma would plant winter radish seeds like daikon and black Spanish in November, understanding that these roots would develop slowly through winter and could be harvested as needed. She knew that winter radishes were incredibly hardy and could survive harsh conditions while providing fresh, crisp vegetables when other sources were unavailable. Those November plantings would provide reliable nutrition and storage vegetables that could last until spring when fresh foods became available again. Your grandma's November garden proved that winter doesn't end the growing season. It transforms it into something even more valuable. These 20 vegetables provided fresh food through the harshest months when store-bought produce was expensive and limited. Her November plantings were insurance against hunger and proof that with the right knowledge, fresh vegetables were possible year-round. But there's one November planting mistake that could kill every plant you put in the ground, and most gardeners make it without realizing the danger. Click the video on screen to discover what it is before winter arrives, because this mistake could mean the difference between fresh food all winter and empty garden beds.